everyone, and welcome to Women Get on Board's virtual speaker series. As we get everyone in and get settled, we just have a few tech tips for you before we start our event. So please make sure to turn your cameras off and your mute on for the duration of the session. The session will be recorded and shared in a follow-up communication along with a feedback survey. You're welcome to use the chat function at any time to ask a question to be answered during the Q&A portion after the panel discussion. Now I will turn it over to Deborah Rosati, the founder and CEO of Women Get on Board.
Thank you, Keisha. Delighted to be here. Welcome, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to our Women Get on Board virtual speaker series today. Hard to believe it's the end of November, and here we are. I am the founder and CEO of Women Get on Board, and we are a member-based company that connects, promotes, and empowers women to corporate boards. We have over 750 members across Canada with diversity in our membership, and our goal is quite simply to get more women on boards, one board at a time. We are delighted to be hosting our speaker series, and Keisha, can you go to agenda, please? There. We're delighted to be hosting our virtual speaker series today with our sponsor, MMP LLP, on the topic of purpose-led companies, the role of the board. The agenda for today's session will be a fireside chat followed by a Q&A. Please share your questions in the chat function and they will be moderated. After the Q&A, I will do a brief thank you and closing remarks. I would like to introduce our fireside interviewer. Sandra Porteous is a senior manager of consulting services with MMP's consulting group in Toronto. Sandra has created multi-year diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility strategies for Crown Corps, federal and provincial government agencies. Her lifelong passion is for equity work that started as a journalist in a male-dominated news organization, and most recently saw her becoming the first director of inclusion and engagement for both CBC and Ontario Transit Agency Metrolink. Sandra has a very long, tenured, and very accomplished career. I like to, before I turn it over, I love this statement about Sandra. She is passionate about the work of creating a thriving, inclusive community by fostering a customized approach to the work of equity, diversity, and inclusion, where all employees and members experience the powerful sense of belonging. Over to you, Sandra.
Thank you very much. My mother would be very proud that you were able, and my father, you were able to say Porteous. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's my pleasure, Deborah, to introduce Mary Larson. And I will say I spoke to Mary Larson once when I was preparing to join MMP, and after that call, I was very determined to not only work with her, but to learn from her. Mary's not just a colleague, she's an incredible role model. Obviously, a lot of women are inspired by her, but she's taken on a lot of leadership roles, both as executive for international companies and as a partner in top-tier consulting firms. Mary's expertise around strategy, culture, governance, and leadership has earned her the trust of many CEOs and corporate boards. And although today I am the one asking the questions, lucky me, I will tell you that Mary in a room asks the best questions I've heard. And she knows what questions will get us the right answers, the answers we need to drive both behavior and culture. Her expertise in this area is so broad. It includes transformation team at McDonald's, directing technology commercialization at Elkham, and helping lead up strategy and government affairs for very well-known agencies, including a Canadian food company. I was thrilled when I realized I was going to be interviewing somebody who co-founded the International Women's Forum in Canada. And perhaps most importantly, the thing I'm learning the most from Mary is about her long-term commitment to sustainability, which means she's a leader in the all-important work of environment, social, and governance. So Mary, thank you for letting me put you on the hot seat today.
Yes, really. I definitely feel on the hot seat.
I told Mary I'm gonna throw in a couple questions she doesn't know I'm gonna ask, but that's not really true. So Mary, we're gonna start at the beginning, and I think not surprisingly, this is the most logical question. Can you define what a good purpose statement should actually look like?
Yes. purpose gets talked about a lot. And, one of the things that our clients have said, oh, well, we need a statement of purpose, but what the heck is it? It's not vision, it's not mission, it's something different. And what it really is something extremely straightforward, which is, if a company thinks about an organization, what are the unique set of capabilities, the things it can do better than anybody else to meet a critical socioeconomic need? So that forces, in fact, I was literally, before I came down here, having a conversation with a CEO, a gentleman who runs about $100 million business, about the purpose of that business. And it was a very interesting conversation, because what he was thinking about is, what am I going to say that's going to motivate not only the employees, but customers and any other stakeholder that knows the business. It shouldn't have words like aim or strive. Because aim or strive is kind of like this airy fairy sort of thing. It should explain why the company exists, how business is carried out, so how something actually ends up happening, and what the company wants to be in some sort of measurable terms. So a good example is IKEA. IKEA basically says, we offer a wide range of well-designed functional home furnishing products at prices so low that as many people as possible will be able to afford them. So this is basically makes what they can do better than anybody else is design these functional, stylish furniture, price it really low, and the need that they're serving is this idea of having as many people as possible afford them. Hydro-Quebec has a very powerful one as well, because they say, as recognized leaders in hydropower and large transmission systems, we export clean, renewable power and leverage our expertise and innovations within Quebec and around the world. We make a strong contribution to Quebec's collective wealth and play a central role in the emergency of a low carbon economy. Really clear about it's cheap hydroelectric power, and they are contributing to Quebec and to the future of our need to have renewable power. So those are really good examples of purpose statements.
I think I've never actually thought of the concept of what do you do better than anyone else, because I think I can't believe I've never actually encountered that thought before, but that's amazing. So then how do you define purpose-driven board leadership? What does that look like?
Well, this is an interesting thing, because I hadn't really thought about it before, but unless it's a family or business, the boards can be longer than the tenure of the CEO by like 2 to 3 times.
Yeah.
So I would say that the board has an incredibly important role in helping ensure that purpose has been defined, and that it is actually ingrained in strategy, that people are actually in the company are pursuing the purpose. And so you could make an argument that this idea of the board's role and purpose is a relatively new one. And I think that is the case for about 4 reasons. One of them is that there's been a shift in societal values, and this has been speeded up by COVID. People, customers, suppliers, employees are looking for different things from their work and from their products and services. The role of business has been redefined in the past 5 or 6 years. I mean, this has been true in the UK for quite a while, but there was recently Canada came out with I think it's C12, but it basically is a statement that the purpose of business is to, in fact, improve the not just shareholder value, but stakeholders' concerns on a broad level. And then there's also this notion that boards are actually taking on the role of being stewards of culture. And this is something that we saw in some research we did with the ICD about 2 to 3 years ago, where boards were realizing that they needed to ask questions not only about financial results, but how business was getting done, because the risks of not doing so were very, very high. And then the 4th reason is it's always Michael Porter. He always comes up with something. But his notion right now is, which I think is an enduring one, which is that boards and companies or organizations need to create shared value. And this is a notion of that the role of a company is to create value that is good for the business, but also good for the world, which is a really interesting idea.
I guess one of the things that people constantly talk about is there's grand visions and statements and mission statements. But once a statement like this has been created, what do you advise the board to do to ensure it's lived? Because employees often will point out, oh, I read that, but how do you make sure it's actually lived by the organization? What's the role of the board?
Well, I think the board has to ask tough questions. First of all, I think it's pretty important. Board should be making sure that strategy is considered at every single board meeting. And maybe you don't need to have a discussion of purpose at every board meeting, but I think there are 5 questions that boards should ask. And we kind of look at this as a framework for whether purpose statements are being lived or not. So one of them is it present? So, is it reflected in the annual report? Is it somehow apparent when someone receives an offer letter? Is the purpose of the company in the offer letter? Is it and not, these walls with values on them? That's, we don't really like that. But is it how investment decisions are made or how important employees are treated? Is it important? And I think it has to be big enough that people would care about it. Like IKEA's with the well-designed furniture that you can ship. It is important that people have good furniture. Is it authentic? So this is a really interesting thing about, does it actually reflect the character of an organization? So you're not talking about something that doesn't fit with who you are. Does it serve an advocacy role? And this is it powerful enough that people would want to buy your product and actually work for your company? So it has to have some sense of pull. And is it achievable? So this is something that says, and this goes right to decisions being made about investments. Are resources being put against achieving the purpose? If not, then you've got to rethink it. So I would argue that these are really important strategic questions that boards should be asking pretty frequently.
Okay, our next question for you. It sounds as if purpose is actually really table stakes for boards. And I don't want to go completely negative, but everyone always likes to talk about risks. So what are the risks when a board does not focus on purpose?
I think there are at least 3 that I would be really concerned about. One of them would be that there's employee turnover, unwanted employee turnover. And these days, this is something that employee defection is a huge one. And particularly in sectors like hospitality, and where people just sort of said, I really don't like having to work like slave wages kind of thing. Brand damage is a big issue. So Nike has a statement of purpose that is very interesting, to expand human potential. We do that by creating groundbreaking sport innovations, by making our products more sustainably, by et cetera, by making a positive impact to communities where we live and work. Unfortunately, they decided to go with a supplier about a year ago that was employing Uyghurs, and when somebody investigated, it was in slave conditions. Yes. That damage to the brand is, how do you get that back? Right. And then the last one, I think, is health and safety. I mean, you can actually create a situation in which employees or customers are endangered by the fact that purpose isn't being achieved. And Boeing was a really good example of this. It said that their purpose is about protecting their customers, but they were in such a rush to get the MAX out the door, and they built factories where the oversight wasn't just what it needed to be, and they convinced the FDA to remove some of the specific training issues around the planes, and so they forgot their purpose. So it can be very dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of considered that Boeing example before, as we wrote about the news story, but for sure drifting away from purpose. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit now, or get you to talk to me a little bit about the issue of trust. Because we hear about the decline in trust that some citizens have, and it's Canada, US, it's international, in their institutions, and losing trust even in governments to actually deliver, to affect meaningful change. People just feel like they're giving up. So how does focusing on purpose help to build trust for organizations in general? Because it seems like there's so much fake news and misinformation that really I'm interested in hearing if there's a connection between loss of trust and purpose.
Right. So I think people are looking to see whether organizations are doing something that actually that makes a difference.
Okay.
So Unilever is one of my favorite examples of a company. The CEO and the board decided not to merge with Kraft, I think it was, because the CEO and the board said, we really want to continue to pursue the things that we feel are important around sustainability. But they went beyond that. They decided that one of the things that they needed to do to serve populations in places like India was, the distribution systems don't work very well there. And so they hired something on the order of 65,000 Shakti entrepreneurs. Shakti, by the way, means empowerment in Hindi. And I think about 50,000 of their brothers and husbands to deliver small packages of Unilever products to small towns. What has happened is that these women then become self-sufficient. They're making a living. The company is doing well.
Yeah.
And people are actually able to wash their clothes and do the things that they want to do with these products. Nestle is another good example. They decided that they really wanted to ensure that they were capturing high quality coffee. They buy their coffee through farmers in 30 countries around the world. These farmers are at the risk of moving into subsistence farming and not necessarily doing a good job with the environment. And what Nestle has done is provided training, good seeds, and support to the farmers so that the farmers can stay in business, they can support their families, and supply of coffee, the supply chain is not disrupted. In talking to the client that I just was talking to this morning, what they want to do is, in the hospitality sector, is create a sense of lifelong empowered and career pathing across a variety of properties, so that people don't feel like they're just employees, they actually feel part of the organization.
It's fascinating because those stories you just told really make you want to get behind the organization, especially when you hear them. That's fascinating. Can purpose be used in other ways?
If you have a purpose that really reflects your company, then you could say, well, what is that thing that I do better than anybody else? And could I do other things with that capability? So you could make an argument that if you know that what you're able to do, for example, Hydro-Quebec with hydroelectric power, now they know how to transmit power. What about, and I'm sure that they've already thought about this, but what about batteries? What about other kinds of power? What about power storage? So can you extend the fact that they are very capable of producing and distributing power? Could they extend that? Could they extend it through their strategy? So I think there is a really good purpose statement can allow you to extend your strategy to something really different, not without changing it.
Yeah, interesting. So the question for you, although I've seen you working with clients, I'm going to the Mary Larson School of how to work with clients effectively. My question for you is, how do you help the clients in terms of this kind of work?
Well, it's an interesting, we typically do it in the context of strategic planning. We are, in this particular case, the case I'm working with right now is we are going through a strategy session, a series of strategy meetings with the senior management team. And one of the things that does come up is this notion if we're going to define what it is we want to be in the next 5 years, it leads to a question of purpose. It how should I put this? It really demands that the senior team and the senior leader or the owner think hard about this, because it will tend to drive where the company's going to focus its investments. Is it going to focus it on making technology work better? Is it going to focus on making employees feel like they're getting the kind of training they need? Is it, for example, going to be, if you were IKEA, putting more and more research into ergonomic furniture, or is it going to force a discussion around supply chain issues? So I think in the context of strategic planning, that it always comes up. I think the other thing is we also sometimes just are really nasty with our clients, because they will come up with a statement of purpose and we'll say, that really isn't very powerful. So one of our clients was talking about, we want to serve as the global steward of antimicrobial technology. And so we said, well, what does it mean to be a global steward?
Yeah.
And what the hell is antimicrobial? What the hell are you doing about antimicrobial technology? And so by the time we got to to something that we were all happy with and the board was happy with, was to improve human and animal welfare through ongoing research and development of our innovative solutions to antimicrobial resistance. So this was talking about, who they were trying to do this for, and talking about the fact that they have an innovative solution to antimicrobial resistance, which is basically the bacteria that pile up when you have a cut and it's hard to get it to heal.
That's fascinating. I'm going to ask you one last question, just so I can make this feel more like you're being interviewed by an investigative journalist. in this era of whatever you want to call it, the Great Resignation, how many employees do you think would be affected by a purpose statement that they read? And I'm just going to give you a quick example. Somebody was telling me a story about high demand for warehouse supervisors. And they said there were 400 warehouses in this area of Toronto that were looking for people. And the individual said, I went on a website and I wrote and I read how meaningful it was that they were shipping environmental equipment, and I would be part of that. And they explained my job in terms of, to your point, purpose, maybe accidentally. Do you think that's a way that we can keep people engaged in taking on work after having worked at home for so long and maybe not wanting to do a return to offices or workplaces?
I think it could be very powerful. My son just took a job with an organization that is in the hospitality sector. He is making very little money after, he's got a university degree from a very good university. And my husband and I kind of went, oh my God. But he feels, and it's right up front on this particular organization's website, he feels he's going to work for an organization that really cares about its guests. His first day at work was, he was told all about the values of the company, what was going to happen to him, what it was going to be like to work in a team. And when I spoke to him last night, he was totally passionate about this.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, I found this really interesting, and I'm going to go home and think about what I could do better than anyone else. Right now, I'm coming up with talking and asking you questions. That might be it for today. So I think we have an opportunity to answer some questions. And I'm wondering where those are. Oh, I think we have some. We already have some. Mary, do you mind if I read these out loud?
No.
Okay.
Oh dear, I was supposed to move closer to the camera.
Oh, yes. Yes. Okay. What is the use of mission? That's a really good one that I actually was thinking about last night. What's the use of a mission statement versus purpose?
Well, a mission statement is slightly different. In fact, actually, I think they're almost used interchangeably these days. Mission statements are meant to be disseminated internally. They are a statement that says our mission is to do a certain set of things so that we can become this. I sometimes say that sounds a lot like a purpose statement to me. The problem with mission statements sometimes is that they are so high level that they become kind of meaningless.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the problems. Vision, by the way, is very different. Yeah, vision statement is something that you tell the outside world, and it can be quite. Our vision is that we're going to be the largest transportation company in the world.
Right.
I'm sure that I have no idea what I'm trying to think, car manufacturer, EVs, electric vehicles.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure that Tesla has a very, very, very lofty.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
That's
So your next questioner asked, would a clear distinction and separation between purpose and strategy not be helpful? So purpose being the fundamental reason an organization exists. And where are we here? Sorry. Beyond. So what do you think about that? Because the example they're using is Nike's core purpose to expand human potential could be the core purpose for a pharma company or an HR consultancy.
Yes, although their purpose statement actually, and I skipped over their purpose have specifically around action and activity and the equipment that people use to do that.
Right.
Strategy is what you're going to do. So what are you going to do to achieve your purpose? And culture is how you get it done. So now there are some aspects of strategy, for example, strategic initiative may have some hows in it, but fundamentally strategy is what, and culture is how.
Okay.
Mary and Sandra, it's
Yeah.
Deborah. You can't see me, but can you make sure you're closer to the mic, Mary? Sometimes we haven't been able to hear you clearly, and I know you have such wonderful things to say. So there we go. Thank you. That's okay.
We're
Thank
also
you.
a bit of a construction site here. It's an impromptu studio, so there may be noise drowning us out. Okay, one of the other questions that we have is there a framework to use in the formulation, of a purpose-led statement? Questions to pose that will help. So if you're working with a group, do you have obviously you have a process when you do this?
Right. So I think, and by the way, there's a white paper that we're going to be sending out right after this talk. So they will have some of those elements in it. But so I think one of them is one of the frameworks is this question about presence, achievability, differentiation, or authenticity. What's the other word? I've just forgotten it. Authenticity, presence. Oh my gosh. I thought importance, authenticity, advocacy. So a purpose statement needs to meet, but there are specific questions, and they're laid out in the white paper. That I think that framework is very important. The other one that is so simple to use is this notion of what is it, this unique capability that is serving an important socioeconomic need. That one, I think, is just, it's keep it simple, stupid. It's like culture is how things get done around here. That is a definition of culture. Purpose is what we do better than anybody else in the world to solve a problem. And I think that, and then you can ask these other questions around presence, authenticity, importance, advocacy, and achievability, which are good tests of whether the purpose is actually a powerful one or not.
Okay, I think that's a good framework that I hope people were able to write down. So this is an interesting question. What can female board directors in particular bring to focus on purpose at the board level? Do we, and how can we add distinct value?
That is a really interesting.
Yeah.
I think so. A few years ago, when we did this research, we talked to 55 board members across the country. It was a very solidly mixed group gender-wise. I would say probably 40% of the people that we spoke to were women, and the rest were men. I can't prove this, but I do think that the women members of boards spoke more about purpose, spoke more about culture, that there was a more obvious link in people's minds between strategy and culture and purpose than, you know, that they were able to make this explicit link. And perhaps less fear about talking about some of these important issues, because there is a tendency for them to be seen as soft. These issues aren't soft. If you could have the best sounding strategy in the world, and you could have some sense that your numbers are going to be just fine, but if you haven't thought about whether your culture is supportive of getting things done the right way so that you can achieve your purpose, you will be in very big trouble. And I think women as board members have the courage to ask those questions. They, in many cases, we've been brought in, for example, I mean, you and I do DE&I work, yep, and we do ESG work. It is often the women on boards who ask those questions. Yes. And now they're being heard, yeah, because the downside of not paying attention to these issues, yes, is becoming more and more apparent.
That's fascinating, Mary. So even more reason why we want to see women on boards, obviously. Okay, so I think we have another question. Just wanted to share the immediate impact of today's purpose webinar. I messaged our head of HR at www.tiptappay.com about the important point of attracting warehouse workers with their purpose. Oh, awesome. The head of HR wrote back saying, yes, definitely struggle with attracting and retaining good warehouse staff. So we'll look at adding some purpose-led differentiation to our process. It does set us apart for sure. Well, that's fascinating. That's great. That's fantastic. Yeah, this is real breaking news in the middle of Mary's session.
Well, the other thing about that is that, well, that is the way you can measure whether purpose is making a difference. So one of the things a good board should be doing is saying, just the way that boards should be trying to measure culture. By the way, you can measure culture by doing exit interviews and by looking at engagement scores and all that sort of thing. By the same token, with purpose, you can ask employees whether they actually even know what the purpose is. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And exit interviews work quite well. You can ask your suppliers and your customers whether they know whether the purpose, what it is and whether it's working. I was also really struck by Subway, which has a statement of purpose of providing a variety of great tasting, nutritious food choices while reducing our environmental impact and creating a positive influence in the communities we serve around the world. They explicitly laid out a number of hard measures that would help them measure whether that purpose was being achieved. And it was around sustainability programs, community engagement, food safety, people not getting sick from their food, customer satisfaction. So one of the other things a board can do is actually lay out a set of, in the scorecard that is used to actually measure performance of the company, add some things in that actually relate to company purpose.
Well, I'm afraid there's still more questions.
Oh, good.
Your coffee break? No, it's fine. Okay, what is the best way to measure purpose?
Oh, well, that's the scorecard idea.
Yes.
If you think about, I mean, I would think that if I were IKEA, for example, I would want to see whether the purpose was being achieved by making sure that I was serving more and more people who otherwise would not have been able to afford furniture. So I would be asking questions, I'd be looking at the demographics. I would be making sure that I was ahead of the game in terms of um, product quality, durability, and so that people would not only buy the furniture, but that it would hold up for a while. And I must say, anything that I have from IKEA does, it's like I can't destroy it. You have to give it away or take it apart. So I think with respect to every purpose statement, there ought to be things that you could, as a board member, ensure that are actually being tracked.
Can I ask you just a quick question? Because I meant to ask you this before we started. Do you think this is a hard sell for boards? You may have to speak up because of the.
Yes, we're in a hotel that's going to open in about 2 weeks.
It's going to open. We're in the middle of a sign of the return to normality.
Right.
So is it a hard sell, do you think, or boards getting up? I hate to say getting on board, but they.
No, I mean, it would be interesting to find out from
Yes.
people that are listening to us.
Let us know.
I think it is. Let's put it this way: 3 years ago, when we were doing these interviews with board members, there was a lot of discussion around culture. People recognized it was important. When one or two of the board members mentioned purpose, there were a lot of blank stares. And I don't think that's as true now as it was 2 to 3 years ago before COVID. But I would suspect it might be very hard to get the board to say, oh, we need to have a statement of purpose. I think where you start with the CEO.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Always start at the top, right?
Yeah.
Okay, the questions keep coming in. How do we avoid confusing purpose, vision, mission, and differentiated core competency? That's a good question.
Yes. So I would argue, and sorry for the hammering in the background, we can't do anything about it. I would probably say if you're going to do anything, make sure that you've defined purpose. Core competencies will be a subset of that.
Yes. I get that.
You may want to have a vision statement for external, making sure that there's something really lovely on your annual report cover or something like that. You might not need mission.
Sure.
You could basically combine purpose and because it really is the thing that a mission statement will do. Typically, will say so that we will be something. So you can add that mission to it.
The whole idea of purpose a little more exciting, frankly, and maybe it's Okay, another question. And here it is. Once you have purpose statement and you have a scorecard, how do you keep this alive? I think that's always a good question. Is it one committee over another responsible for keeping it alive? Because we've all seen these things. If nobody owns it, nobody owns it. So what's your feedback on that question?
It's a really important question. There's been a lot of debate recently about, for example, with ESG. Should you have an ESG committee, or should it fall under the aegis of governance or strategy or the audit committee? People have tended to decide that rather than having an ESG committee, it should be the responsibility of all of the committees. That becomes very difficult to manage in some cases with respect to board governance. My tendency would be to say that purpose would not fall under audit. It shouldn't fall under governance. If there is a strategy committee, maybe. But I would prefer to see it that the board chair and the CEO have this as something that they agree is going to be important to talk about. And that, as I mentioned earlier, strategy ought to be on every single agenda, and purpose and measurement of whether the purpose is making a difference ought to be reviewed as often as you review the scorecard for how well you're doing against the strategy and against the culture that you said that you want to have in place in your purpose. So I certainly don't want to have a purpose committee.
Yeah, yes.
That would not be a good idea. No. And definitely audit committee would not be the place to put it.
No, that's fascinating. It is interesting. You want these things to live. Well, I think we, believe it or not, might have run out of questions. If anyone has another question, feel free to jump on, or Deborah, come back. We have time to give you a tour of the spa that's being reopened. You can, we're unable to book appointments, but it's not open. But yeah, those are some really good questions. Oh, there is one more. Do you mind, Deborah?
Please go ahead. Ask the question.
Mary,
We've got lots of time.
Okay, great. Mary, the question is, could you hold the CEO in giving updates on the purpose?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a very, very good idea. Yeah. It could be the kind of final conversation that you have with the CEO, and I think that there is this not every meeting. There's usually sort of a wrap up kind of situation that most people get into with their CEO at the end. No, this is the responsibility of the CEO. And what I said earlier about the tenure of the board being longer than that of the CEO, the board kind of is holding this over time, but the CEO is responsible for defining it and making sure that it's making a difference.
It could certainly make serving on the board, I think, more meaningful.
Oh yeah,
to watch this over a number of years. Okay, and remember, if you, to Mary's point, if you're working with the board and you have feedback for us, please let us know. And the next question is, what are the risks to be aware of when the board is developing and I guess embarking on, for the first time, developing purpose? What do you want people to know?
I think that the most important thing is to define a set of capabilities that are truly enduring and critical. So, and important, obviously, and unique. And so, if you look again at Hydro-Quebec, it is defining its purpose around a core competency, which is producing and disseminating hydroelectric green power. And that is something that will stand the test of time. And so if you're Tesla and what you're saying is the important thing that you're going to be doing is providing movement that is ecologically efficient, that's something that's going to be standing the test of time. I mean, I have no idea whether that's what they say. I don't know. But whatever the thing that we do authentically well and uniquely well has to be important and it has to be enduring, because you can't change your purpose statement every 2 years.
Yes.
The other thing would be that being very careful about thinking who you're doing this for. I was looking this morning at Four Seasons statement of purpose, and their statement of purpose directly talks about their employees and their guests. And so make sure that you've really thought through what it is the unique capability is doing for whom, and that it can actually lead to something that is truly valuable, not just for dollars and cents and economic value, but this idea of shared value that Porter talks about.
That's fascinating. Okay, I don't see any more questions, but I think Deborah's going to remind you that if you have questions later on, Mary will get back to you. And Deborah, I think that looks like it's it.
Don't go away, you two. I have some questions for you. You finished in a really very efficient way. I want to thank you both for trying a unique approach to a video conference side by side. That's how close Sandra and Mary work together. So that's our first of that type of side by side, but very conversational. Really appreciate that. I think you both brought some really practical and insights on and great examples, Mary, of companies that are purpose-led, like IKEA and Tesla and Unilever. But so as I was sitting here and I was thinking, how am I going to think about those 5 questions? And I'm a very visual person. So I came up with an acronym that maybe we can all use together. So I thought, I'm going to call it the PIAAA. So P for present, I for important, A for authentic, A for advocacy, and A for achievable. And I think those tied in. So I was like, how am I going to remember this? So let's call it the PI AAA questions that you need to think about as a board member about the purpose. And that really resonated with me. So I was just trying to think about how I could remember it. So I wanted to share that with you to think how that.
I forgot.
I know. And I was like, I'd forget too, but I'm like, okay, you know how sometimes, you know, they would teach you, just remember an acronym and it'll come back to you. So PI AAA.
That's a good one.
Love it.
And we're all good. Anyway, and the other thing I want to say about purpose, what I'm seeing more in the boardroom is sustainability. Your purpose has to be sustainable. And I think that really ties into your overall ESG strategy. And I know, Mary, it really weaves in with the work you do around culture and purpose. So thank you so much, both of you. We will look forward to sharing. Sorry, Mary, did you want to comment?
I did. I wanted just to mention that we are inviting people who want to. If you can go directly to us, to me, if you would like to have an hour-long sort of session to, you know, with maybe eight or nine people to talk about some of the challenges that you're facing with your boards with respect to this, we'd be happy to host something like this. So more of a conversation, a roundtable conversation. And if we get 8 people and want to do it, and if we get another 8 people, we'll do it twice. So it's basically, you know, just an opportunity to chat about this, because you may be sitting on a board with a chair that's probably not going to be really interested in this. So how much you position this so that it becomes a topic that people want to talk about. And I just did want to remind you, we will be sending the white paper out to everybody. I think, Julie.
I'll speak to that, Mary. Okay. Just on that very note, I'm reading the chat and I'm taking the mic away from you, Sandra, because Mackie has said, thanks, Mary. Very interesting. We'd like to talk about maybe doing this with my head office in Switzerland. So I guess you're going to Switzerland.
Oh.
Compliments of MMP. Pack your bags. Pack your bags. Anyway, obviously great dialogue. So I would say to anyone, if you're okay with that, Mary, and with Sandra, is reach out to you on LinkedIn. You'll respond if you are interested in following up with a roundtable, a little bit more of a Q&A and discussion. That would be great. 2 things. We like to thank our speakers, and we will be making a donation to our charity partner, which is very appropriate for Giving Tuesday today. And our charity partner is Dress for Success, the Toronto chapter. So we always donate on behalf of our speakers for their time. I want to thank MMP for being our sponsor today. So thank you, Mary, and your colleagues. Our next Women Get on Board speaker series is January 26th and is at noon as we hold these speaker series. And the topic is, what are independent review committees? What are they? And it is going to be sponsored by BlackRock Canada. So I hope you can join us. In your follow-up immediately from the session will be a follow-up thank you with a survey. So we'd love to hear from you. And yes, we did have some technical challenges on background, but what I thought was really unique is we had them together in a boardroom, and Mary and Sandra, you will forever be known for that, side by side.
It's not a boardroom. There are pedicure chairs behind us.
Oh my God. Oh, okay. In the spa. So they will remember you had a spa treatment. We'll talk about purpose-led companies. So thank you both. A recording of this session and the white paper that Mary has referred to will come in the days to follow in the next few days. So stay tuned. So immediately after the session, you'll get a survey. We'd love to hear back from you. And then in a couple of days from now, when the recording is finalized and we have the white paper, you will follow on with that. And Mary, what we'll do in the follow-on days is we'll put yours and Sandra's email address in the recording and the white paper if people want to reach out to you directly, but they can certainly do that on LinkedIn. And so just want to say thank you all. We're giving you back 10 minutes in your day, which is very novel. So thank you. Happy holidays, and we will see you in 2022.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.